Good morning, algebra students. It's a rainy Monday morning, and Mrs. Shomari is here to teach you about the quadratic formula. Hope everything is going well for you guys at home. Okay, things are going here in our house. So let's begin. Okay, you should be in your Zeros of a Quadratic packet. We're on page 6, and we're going to talk about this thing called the quadratic formula. Now, if you were to read this paragraph right here up on top, okay, it says in our last few lessons we saw how to solve quadratic equations by factoring, and I know that's hard for some people, especially if you don't have a graphing calculator at home with you. So two things. Number one, I'm going to create another video just going over the factoring of quadratics so you can practice a little bit more or review how to do the signs or whatever. And then, so that was one way to find the roots. Okay, so remember, when you see this word solve, what you are finding are the roots. You are finding the zeros. That's an E. And you are finding the x-intercepts. Okay, you are finding out where your quadratic equation crosses the x-axis. Okay, so what happens is we can do this in many different ways. We can use our graphing calculators and visually see where the roots and the zeros and the x-intercepts are. We can solve by factoring. Okay, so I'm actually going to put this up here. I'm going to put down calculator because you know what? It is a very good method, calculator, to find the roots. But if you don't have a calculator, you need to have another method, okay? And you need to have another method because sometimes your roots are not always nice numbers. Okay, so we can use our calculator. We're looking to solve. We're looking to find the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts, okay? So factoring is one way. Calculator is another way. The third method we're going to learn this week, we're going to spend the whole week on this, is the quadratic formula. And then next week we're going to do completing the square, and then we're going to be done pretty much with solving quadratics. Okay, so here we are in exercise 1. It says solve the quadratic equation x squared plus 8x plus 3 by factoring. Okay, so if we were going to factor this, we would go A, B, C. We want numbers that multiply to give me 3. So if they multiply to give me 3, they must be numbers like 1 times 3. And that's it. So the next step would be, how do I make a 1 times 3 add or subtract to give me this 8 in the middle? And the answer is you cannot. You cannot multiply, you cannot get numbers that multiply to give you 3 that add or subtract to give you 8. Okay, so what happened? Okay, this cannot be factored. And if it cannot be factored, we need another method to be able to find the answers. So let me show you what this looks like. Okay, I put this into my graphing calculator. Okay, and if you have a graphing calculator, you can do this. If you don't, just follow along. Make that light work better. Okay, so I typed it in to my y equals in my graphing calculator, x squared plus 8x plus 3, same problem that you have on your paper. And when I graph it, okay, I do get 2 nice x-intercepts here and here, but if you notice, and I zoom in a little bit, okay, those roots are between 2 integers, okay? So it's between, I can't even see here. It looks like it's close to -1, and then -2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like -8.5. So when they're not nice numbers, okay, and you can't factor, you need this third method, and that's called the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's begin the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula goes like this. Okay, the quadratic formula, x equals -b, and that b came from your ABC up here. Okay, whether it's capital or small doesn't matter. It's still the same letter, same number. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Okay, so, oh boy, look what I just did. Okay, there we go. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Now, there is a little video that's going to help us remember the parts of that song, the parts of that equation. So let me bring that up for you right now. I'm going to show you this video. It's on YouTube. It's also on your Google Classroom. Okay, so let's take a look at this video. On YouTube, also posted on your Google Classroom. So I would suggest you listen to it.
The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you try. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Okay, let's try that one more time. This time, see if you can't sing along.
The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you try. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
So that's the quadratic formula song, and that's hopefully going to help you be able to put these letters in the right places just a little bit better than if you didn't have the song. Okay, so this is, I'm going to show you one example, or two examples to show you how the quadratic formula works. So the first example is the same one that we had up here. Okay, so we know it can't be factored, so let's see what happens. Okay, so here we go. We are going to find the values a, b, and c in the quadratic formula. So a is equal to that invisible 1 that comes in front of the x squared. So that's 1. B is equal to the 8. And c is equal to 3. So those numbers come right out of the quadratic equation that you're trying to solve to find the roots of. So A, B, C, they're the numbers, but when you don't see a number, remember that's the invisible 1. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is take that B, and I'm going to turn it into B squared. B squared. 8 times 8 is 64. And I do this because there are people out there who will take their calculator, and they will put things in the calculator and make a very important mistake that will get you the entire answer wrong. So this one step here will help you not make that mistake when we get to that point in certain problems. Okay. And I'm looking at exercise 3 going, that's the problem. Okay, that -9. So we'll see that in a minute. Okay, so we are going to carefully substitute these values into the quadratic formula and express your answer. And we're going to compare the answer to exercise 1. Okay, so what we're going to do is, we already know what A, B, and C are. We're going to substitute them into the quadratic formula. Okay, now when I do this, I usually sing it in my head. So here we go. I'm going to start way over here because I'm going to need some room. Okay, x equals -b, so that's -8. Okay, plus or minus, and that plus or minus just means that I have 2 roots. Okay, because remember, when you graph that quadratic, you have 2 x-intercepts. So one of them is this number plus what you're going to get, and the other one is this number minus what you're going to get. Okay, so x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's 64, minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so the next step is we're going to simplify what's under this radical. X equals -8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times 1 times 3 is 12 all over 2. Okay, next step. X equals -8 plus or minus the square root. Now 64 minus 12 is 52 all over 2. Now you can simplify that radical 52. Okay, but that's a lesson for another day. So I'm going to leave my answer this way. It is ugly. You can put this into your calculator and come up with a nice little decimal answer. Okay, and then you would get the 2 answers that we saw right here in part A. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one right there for a second. Okay, and in the notes, I will come back and do the problem. I'll finish it up the way it should be done. Okay, so I'm going to end this video right here. I'm going to come back with part 2. I'm going to do this problem again and finish it off. I'm going to do exercise 3 with you, and then I'm going to ask you to start looking at these problems on page 7 so you can practice them on your own. Okay, but for right now, that's enough of this video. I'm going to come back with part 2 and show you how to finish this one off and do exercise 3.